Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez, and today we got Chris Watkins joining the show of Sactown Sports 1140, host of Kings Weekly. What's going on, Chris? How you doing, bro?
Yes, sir. I'm doing good, man. I am a frequent Kings beat listener as well, and I know that they've been joking about how you've been looking like you're in a bunker, like trapped in a bunker as you've been relocating. And I would just like to announce for those watching us on YouTube, I have replaced Brendan in said bunker, so I will now be taking hostage in this bunker for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's actually a bunker that the media.
But besides that, I'm doing great.
Yeah, we kind of put different media members in timeout, and they have to spend time in these bunkers. So I just got out. I did my sentence, did my time, and got out. And yeah, Chris had a little slip up at last game. He was wearing a Kings logo, and that was enough. That was enough. He was out of there. Relegated to the bunker.
I am guilty. I would say I am guilty. Yeah, no comment.
But
let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. So the Sacramento Kings are obviously rolling right now. They've won their last 5 games. They've won 8 of their last 10 after starting 0 of 4. They're killing it. They are the second best offensive rating in the league right now. StatMuse actually has this, and shout out Omer Khan on Kings Herald for finding this. Actually, third all time in offensive rating right now, which is fucking insane. First is Boston this year. Second is 2020-21 Brooklyn, which we're talking about, unless I have this wrong, but I'm pretty damn sure. We're talking about Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden, 3 of the best offense players of all time. And the Kings offense is like right there. They're ridiculous. I know you tweeted out some numbers earlier today. Like what is standing out to you with what's working with this Kings offense?
I mean, it's really just, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, but just how sustainable it feels with it's not just like 1 or 2 things that they're really doing well. It's a collection of things that they're doing well, and it's all pointing towards the numbers are matching up with the eye test, I think, is the big thing. It's like you look at number 2 in 2-point shot percentage. Like that's a testament to we're seeing De'Aaron Fox be incredible at the rim. Domantas Sabonis is finally found his touch again, it seems, after starting the season slow at the rim. And then, just their points per game, offensive efficiency, every single one of their numbers are in the top 5, top 10 in the league. And it's, it's like I said, it's just a lot of different elements for this offense are clicking all at once.
Absolutely. To go through some of those, you mentioned first in 2-point percentage. That also has them first in effective field goal percentage because they're 7th in 3-point attempts per game at 35.3 and 6th in 3-point percentage at 38.2. I know they said at the beginning of the year after preseason wrapped up that they wanted to hit 43s a game. Not make 43s, but attempt 43s a game. Obviously, they're at that 35. There's been a couple games where it looks like teams try to run them off the line and take away that 3-point shot. Like I think that's what we saw San Antonio try to do. Kings only got up 8 threes in that second half, and they still find a way to win because, like you mentioned, the finishing at the rim is so good. I think that Malik Monk is the other one that stands out to me that's been ridiculous at finishing around the rim. Like super creative. Obviously, he's got stupid bounce, and just like De'Aaron, like will finish through contact on the way down after like contorting his body in just the wildest ways. But they're 8th in pace.
He has like at least one crazy finish per game.
At least
Malik.
At
like
least.
I mean, it's like where, like you're saying, like he's contorting his body in the air, doing something crazy. But then the thing is, it's not even like he's doing like windmill scoop layups behind his head or anything. Like he'll double clutch and then just end at a normal looking layup. Like the dude's athleticism is out of control.
Malik's been going crazy. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was like mid to high 20s that he had yesterday. I think my hot question in preseason that I threw around to media members was who's going to be 3rd in scoring on this team after Fox and Sabonis. And kind of as expected, like it's anybody on any given night. Like HB's played solid. Hashtag not washed, by the way. Malik has his days. Herder is ridiculous right now. 7.1 3-point attempts per game on 51%. And that's 2 different games. San Antonio game, I think he only hit 1. If I'm remembering that correctly. I think the Golden State game, believe it was I don't remember if it was the first or second Golden State game. It was one of their road games. He also only hit 1 triple. Like he's had a couple quiet nights and he's still sitting at 51%. All of their top 6 guys in 3-point percentage or 3-point attempts are shooting above 35%. And actually 5 of them are above 37%. Trey Lyles is the one at 35. Like Herder, 7.1 3-point attempts per game, 51%. Keegan Murray, 6 attempts per game, 37.5%. Malik Monk, 5.5 per game on 37.7%. Fox, 4.9 on 37.5. Lyles, 4.3 on 35.3. TD is Terrence Davis, 3.8 on 40.8%. And we didn't even mention HB is not even part of that. Like right now, HB sitting at 25% on 3.4 a game. And like that is one of the lowest concerns I could ever have about HB is his shooting. That guy is going to be a 35 to 40% 3-point shooter this year. That's going to come around. And like none of these numbers feel ridiculous. Like the Kevin Herter 51% is obviously insane, and that's going to come back down. But I think he's a 40% 3-point shooter. We've seen that throughout the course of his career. Like Fox is the one that stands out here, but he's been ridiculous in the mid-range starting at the end of last year, and that's carried over. And he's put a ridiculous amount of work into his jumper, specifically with assistant coach Luke Laux. So like I'm optimistic with the confidence and just quickness that he's taken those shots, that he's an improved 3-point shooter. We'll see if it's still around 37, but like the 3-point shooting on this roster feels like it could stay this way. I mean, 44% of their shots are threes. 89.7% of their made threes are assisted. Almost 90%, which is ridiculous. It's the 3rd highest rate in the league. And they have the 4th most wide open threes per game at 21 of their, 35 threes are considered wide open on NBA tracking stats, which I think is a defender no closer than 6 feet. They're knocking down 40% of those. They're 4th in assists. They're 9th in free throw attempts, 11th in points in the paint, 5th in passes per game. Like the offensive ball movement is ridiculous. Like I know we talked at the beginning, like 2nd in offensive rating, 3rd highest all time. Like I'd imagine that comes back down a little bit, but like, do you think this team could stay in the top 5 all year?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it at the moment. Like when I think of, I went to the San Antonio game the other day as a fan, you know, it felt like they were playing poorly for about 2.5, 3 quarters there, and then really turned it on, and they still ended up at 120 plus points. And that to me is like the sign of this team is just absurd offensively on a night where it really felt like it wasn't, you know, the offense wasn't flowing in the same way that it had been in the games leading up to it. And it definitely felt like that was more of, you know, they kind of just won off of, I mean, as crazy as this is to say, but they won off of the culture that they've installed so far this season. Like they were able to fall back on a night where they didn't have it and just kind of revert to natural instinct. And they ended up putting, I think it was 56% from the field against San Antonio, 40% from 3, 90% from the line. Like that, those are absurd numbers on a night where, at least eye test wise, and I don't know if you disagree with me, but to me, it didn't feel like they had it against San Antonio, and they still pulled out those kind of numbers.
Oh, I totally agree with you, and Coach Brown agrees with you too. Like Trey Lyles came out to media and was saying that Coach was talking about how he didn't even feel like they had that good of an offensive game, which is ridiculous for those numbers. And I think that's just like your exact point. Like they were pretty sloppy. The 2nd and 3rd quarter were really sloppy for the Kings. Like it felt like, I mean, San Antonio, I think, came in as the 2nd worst defense. So putting up 130 makes sense, but like it weirdly felt like they could have done even more. And in these 5 games that they've all won in a row now, they've dropped 120 plus every single night. That includes 130 against San Antonio, 153 over the Brooklyn Nets
Oh my gosh.
on national TV, which was just a stomp and seems to have broken the Brooklyn Nets. They already had their fair share of issues, but I think they came in actually playing pretty solid defense, and the Kings just totally lit them up. My question is, how far can your offense alone carry you? Because I guess maybe we should start with like their defense real quick, because I asked this question because they haven't been good on defense. They've been 26th in defensive rating right now.
Right.
And I think there's reasons to think that they'll be better in time. Like, they're taking care of little things. I think there's things that Mike Brown has highlighted. Like, their transition defense was really, really bad in preseason and in those first 4 games that they lost in a row. But I think they picked it up since. They allow the second fewest opposing fast break points per game, and also the second fewest opponent second chance points per game, which is also a product of the lowest offensive rebounds per game. That has to do with also giving up a really high field goal percentage. There's not as many offensive rebounds available to opposing teams, but they're closing out possessions when they are able to get a stop. I think winning the possession game is something we've heard Coach Brown talk about a lot. And while the Kings are 7th in 3-point attempts, they're allowing the second least amount of threes. And I think just that margin is going to play in your favor more often than not on a nightly basis. They're not giving up that many free throws per game as of late. That was something they were horrible about early in the year. And they're allowing the least wide open threes per game by a pretty decent margin. It's 10.6 that the Kings are allowing. Second is Dallas with 13.7. That's more than a 3-shot difference from beyond the arc on wide open threes. Like, they're not allowing that. And opponents are converting at the second best rate. It's 43% there. Like, when you see a team that opponents are shooting great on wide open threes, like that makes sense. But at some point that number is going to come back down to earth a little. Like, they obviously don't have a great defensive talent, but when you look at what we've seen from Sacramento on the defensive end, what do you think can be done, if anything, for them to become, like, just honestly, like, even a mediocre defense?
Right. I think it comes down to figuring out the rim protection. To me, that's the biggest thing. And it might just be, I think I was just listening to the Zach Lowe podcast where he had Matt Barnes on, and they talked about the Kings for a minute, and they did talk about the Kings defense and this exact topic of how good can you be when your defense, is there positive signs from the Kings defense? And I don't know if it's cliche, but I kind of just trust that Mike Brown is not going to allow that to happen. I mean, the amount of teaching that he's doing on, a play-by-play basis, it feels like he's not going to allow this team to slip to a bottom tier defense in this league. And like I said earlier, I mean, the rim protection is the thing that might just be baked into this team's weakness. Teams are shooting pretty well from 3 against the Kings, and they're just shooting well in general against the Kings. That kind of thing is you would hope going to level out throughout the season, but I think it's promising that they're ending possessions well. They're first, I believe, in opponent defensive offensive rebounds at 8.8 rebounds a game. So they're ending possessions right there and making sure that teams don't get second chance points, and that's huge for just stopping possessions and not allowing second chance points. And I mean, I think, again, like I said, Mike Brown's just not going to allow this team to be bad on defense. I don't know if that's just me buying into the Mike Brown juice, but again, the amount of times that we've seen him call timeouts on things that he doesn't like, it speaks volume to how much he cares on that end.
He definitely is not going to be okay with them being shit on defense like we've seen in years prior. Like, Mike Brown comes in, and we all know he's a defensive-oriented coach. And then ironically, like, this offense feels very Golden State to me. Do you feel that, by the way? Am I crazy for that? Like,
I absolutely do. And I think they've pointed at it a couple times, but Absolutely. I mean, just with the amount of shooting that they have on this team, and the amount of connective tissue that Mike Brown and the organization has to Golden State, I think that this has always kind of been the direction that they've been hoping to go.
Totally. And Jay Triano's the offensive coordinator. I think Sean on I just did an episode of the Kings Beat, hasn't gone up quite yet, but Sean was saying that like Jay Triano's not getting enough credit here. I think that's a great point because Jay Triano's the offensive coordinator of this team, and they're totally rolling. He's got a great experience. Like the whole coaching staff, like it's a really well put together coaching staff in my mind. And obviously I don't have great perspective on that. It's not like I've covered other coaching staffs prior to just last year's, which was a total mess, but
Right.
they seem like they're all on the same page. And obviously the offense is totally clicking. So shout out not only Mike Brown, but Jay Triano when it comes to that. But if I think that Deuce and Mo put out the number that I want to say it's something in the high teens. I want to say 19, but I could be off a tiny bit on that in defensive rating in the last 10 games. And that just settling into that sort of range where you're not bottom 10, right, I think would be huge for this Kings team. Because like to go back to the question of like how far can a top 5 offense carry you? I think of that Atlanta team last year who ended up second in offensive rating, but they were 26th in defensive rating. They finished 9th in the East and were in play-ins, and then lost in the first round to the Miami Heat, and it wasn't particularly close. You know, like you can't be all offense. I think that it is totally fine for what the Sacramento Kings goal is this season, which is just to make the playoffs. I think that it is totally a recipe for success for the regular season. When you start to get scouted a little bit more, and especially when you're talking a playoff series or people preparing for a play-in game or things like that, like I think this defense is going to really come around to bite you in the ass. So it really needs to be cleaned up. Like Herter hasn't been as good as I expected. I think he's been a lot better recently. But he definitely had some moments. I want to say that Miami game where Tyler Hero hit the questionable game winner that everybody is talking about being a travel. I think that Hero said post game that he wanted a certain switch, but the guy wasn't on the floor. And I hope I'm not wrong on this. I really should double check, but I'm pretty confident that Herter's the guy he was talking about that didn't end up on the floor because he was originally covered by Davion and they ended up getting TD on a switch. When the Kings played Golden State, Herter was guarding Draymond Green, and Curry is pointing at Draymond, bring that guy over here. That's who I want to ISO. There's just work that needs to be done, but I think that we have seen progress. Where are you at with that? Like, first of all, do you agree that this is like recipe for success regular season, but when you start to become a more serious team that you just kind of can't be horrible on defense? And if you are, like, how far can that carry you?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely not sustainable at all. I mean, in especially in playoff basketball where every single possession matters, when it comes down to the end of the games. And I think it's good offensively that the Kings have started to figure this out, but defensively you have to make stops. It's literally the only way you're going to win the game. If you can't make stops, especially in the postseason when, like you said, you're being game planned against, you're playing a team 4 straight times minimum. Every single thing that they're trying to do. If you can't stop them, you're not going to win anything, let alone one series. So like you said, I mean, I think the goal for this team is to make the play-in, make the playoffs, and whatever happens there, I think is kind of gravy. If they get a win, if they win a series, it's all gravy from that point. But you're not going to be able, unless you're going against a similar team where they're also only good offensively, or vice versa, a team that there's not really a team in the West right now that's only good defensively. But you're gonna run if you go against the Golden State, how Golden State's playing right now, though they're not in the playoffs, or in a position to play the Kings in the playoffs right now. That's a kind of situation where maybe it wouldn't matter as much. But yeah, I mean, you at the end of the day, especially with an experienced playoff team, which the Kings are absolutely not, you have to make stops in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And it might sound like we're nitpicking because the Kings are playing phenomenal basketball right now. But
Right.
I think that the only reason that I'm kind of like on that is because I'm really starting to question, like, should we be reconsidering how good this team is? Like,
Mhm.
I came in thinking 38 wins, and I think if I got asked the ceiling of the team, it was like probably just being a 8 seed, you know?
Mhm.
And I think at one point someone asked me, like, could they be a 6 seed? I think it was Matt George. And I'm like, I guess, like, absolute ceiling, but that still feels super unlikely. Like, that feels like a realistic ceiling to me now. Like, I'm not, again, ceiling, everything would have to click, but like, how much has this stretch, and it's 14 games, but like, for the reasons we laid out earlier, this feels sustainable. Like, I'm
Mhm.
really believing, but how much has this run like changed your impression of how good this team could be?
Yeah, I have the same exact question prepped for Frankie tomorrow on my show. I mean, to me, this is the thing that I'm most intrigued with. And as I'm prepping for my show that I'm doing tomorrow, I'm looking ahead to the week that's going to be, and it told me that I'm still incredibly dubious of the ceiling of this team. I mean, as this week they're going at Memphis, at Atlanta, at Boston, it feels like it would be a stretch to hope for them to win two of those games, you know? And so that just tells me that when I really think about this team against some of the top tier in this league, I don't think that they're there yet. Um, and that doesn't necessarily mean, to what you were saying, that they can't be a 6 seed, but I think it also tells me that I think that this team is probably closer to a 500, maybe a little bit over team. Um, and that is, of course, considering health. I think at this moment, the Kings have been incredibly, knock on wood, they've been pretty lucky with their injury management. They haven't had to deal with Kawhi Leonard being out and stuff like, there's teams that have had to deal with injuries already. Giannis has missed a couple games this year. But you know, I, it's tough. I
What
mean,
what would need
the
to
Vegas
happen,
over under was 33.5. I
which
think we
was
can all
stupid.
agree. I think we can all agree that they're going to clear that very, very easily. Um, I think a lot of people like you were at the 36 to 38 win point would be reasonable, and yeah, a 7-8 seed would be probably the peak that this team can go. I still don't really know if I've shaken off that yet, like I said, unless injuries start to happen here, because you look at Portland, they're better than expected. Utah, they're better than expected. OKC is right on our heels right now. Who knows if they fall off? Dallas is a team that is kind of going either way. I keep saying this, but they're one Luka injury away from probably being one of the worst teams in the West. So, it's there's still so much season to go. I don't even know if you can really properly even assess how good they can be.
Yeah. What would need to happen for you to like fully believe?
I mean, the defense for sure. The defense, taking a step up would absolutely do that. I just don't know. To our previous conversation, I don't know if that can happen. Um, Maybe if Harrison starts to get going and Keegan, I think that would probably be it. I think if Keegan starts to find some consistency, get near, 14 to 16 points a game every night, up that 3-point shooting percentage to a little bit closer to 40% from three, and start to be the guy that we saw in the first stretch of the season, at least on an excitement level, that's kind of it's more about adding a variable that I wasn't considering before the preseason prediction, I guess. And Keegan being that level already would be something unanticipated.
Yeah, it makes sense for sure. I mean, like, Keegan has just looked like a rookie recently, and
Right.
there's a lot of things going on. Like, obviously, there's all the off court stuff going on with his family, and hope everything goes smooth with that. He's just getting used to playing in the NBA. That road trip was the first time he's dealt with anything like that when it comes to playing basketball, from my understanding. So I think it's just like typical rookie adjustment stuff. Even though he's probably the most NBA ready rookie, right up there. but it's just kind of typical adjustment stuff. And I think to like the Kings, what is their best win? You know, the teams they've been beating, San Antonio, you're supposed to beat, right? The Lakers, you're supposed to beat. Orlando, you're supposed to beat. Charlotte, you're supposed to beat. Which still credit to them. Like, how often were the Kings supposed to beat teams last year, years prior, and then they'd come out and shit the bed? So, like, credit to that. I'm not trying to overlook it or anything. But then, like, Miami, that's a big win, but Miami's not playing as well as people maybe thought they would.
Right.
The Golden State game, big win, but
dropped
same
2 of
thing.
them.
Right. Yeah, and you dropped 2. You only won 1 of the 3. The Cleveland game, Cleveland came in 8-2.
I would say that's their best win.
That's probably is, right? But even Cleveland has really slowed down afterwards. That Cleveland game is probably big. The Brooklyn game I thought was really big too. But you think the Cleveland one probably?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of expectation going into the game, how that game played out, how they won that game. And I still think Cleveland, regardless of this little streak that they're going on here, I think that they're one of the best teams in the East. I came into that Brooklyn game feeling like they should have done that because of Brooklyn's talent. Brooklyn was not a good team. But I think, again, proving that the Kings are better than them by beating them in the fashion that they did was a good sign nonetheless. I mean, to me, the Brooklyn game was just as important as the San Antonio game to me. Like, the fact that in San Antonio they played poorly, still managed to put up the performance they did is just as impressive to me as the absolute beatdown that they put on Brooklyn. Because the Kings, it's crazy to say, and maybe it's just because we haven't felt this in so long, but the Kings are better than these teams, and they should be beating teams like that on a semi-routine basis if they're worse than them, and that's just kind of the thing that normally happens in the NBA. When you're better than a team, you beat them by X amount of points. As I was just looking, the Kings last year lost to the Boston Celtics by a combined 82 points last year, 53-29.
Which was a heartbreaker for me, as everybody knowing me as a Celtics fan growing up, by the way. I got so much that was that was
right.
So bad.
You were like, you fucked up, bro. What
Yeah.
why did you switch?
And that the one in Boston where I think they got smacked by like 50,
that was the 53. That was
the one that Tyrese came out after and had the I'm not gonna let the culture of the Sacramento Kings infect me or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
God, come so far already.
Feels like so long ago.
When it comes to Fox and Sabonis, who are the clear like 1-2 on this team, and everything runs through. Like, it feels like that Coach Brown is staggering those guys a lot. He talked pregame about playing Fox in 6-minute bursts. And I haven't dove into it yet. It feels like that's kind of what he's doing with most of these guys, and kind of similar with Sabonis. But when it comes to those 2 stars of the team, like, how have they impressed you? And is there like anything more that you want from them? Or is this like, can you even want anything more?
Yeah, I think I was actually just thinking about this. The thing that I've liked the most is from De'Aaron, especially, is just his individual performance, the way he's attacking the rim, his performance at the rim, just how his improvement from 3, all of that, all the obvious stuff is huge for De'Aaron. Domas, the thing that I've loved to see is the fact that he's weaponizing his playmaking. That 1-2 game, the 2-man game that he has with Herter, is something that is an extension of his offense as well. So that's great to see. But the thing that I would like to see from both of them is actually use the same way that the Herter Sabonis 2-man game is weaponized. You really haven't seen too much of Fox Sabonis pick and roll. And that's, to me, the thing that I think could send this offense to another level. We see some of it, and I think it's done pretty well, but it definitely has not stuck out or seemed to me like it's been anything special. And those are your 2 best players. And if you can get them playing off of each other and really, especially having that as another weapon you can use down the stretch, I think that unlocks another huge element for this offense. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
No, I definitely see it. Like, I mean, I think that there's times that within the flow of their offense, they kind of naturally fall into a little bit of a two-man game with those guys. But I think that that's something to me that like it's playoff basketball is when you're going to kind of like be forced into that, right? Like
Right.
the whole
When all the shit breaks down and it just ends up being ball, you know?
Right. And like this is what we saw with Memphis last year, right? Like Memphis was really good without Ja Morant, but they were always going to need Ja Morant for the playoffs when basketball became a lot more like you just need to be able to go out there and get buckets against defenses that are taking away your main schemes. And so I think that they can, I don't even know that like I think that they could run a pick and roll if they just ran a basic. I don't even know that they would do this, but if they just ran a basic pick and roll with three other guys spaced out from the top of key with Fox and Domas, final possession of a game, like I'm feeling pretty good.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and that's what hopefully this team is built for, you know, is to run that pick and roll, have both of those two crash lanes. Hopefully somebody else collapses and that they can either kick it to each other, kick it out to the perimeter, and have somebody way out there creating space and knocking it down. That's the most ideal version of this Kings team. I just don't think we have seen that specific instance yet, but you know, I mean, like you said, that is playoff basketball to a T. But I mean, to Monty McNair's credit, I do think that there is more than enough plug and play players on this roster that you could have that ideal situation with.
Totally. And you know, there's other ways that the team can get better than just like cleaning up the defense. But how much do you feel like there's potential, and obviously there's potential trades and getting people through the draft and things like that, but like how much internal improvement space do you feel like this team has? Like De'Aaron's 24, about a month away from 25. Herder's 24. Sabonis is 26. Keegan Murray 22. Malik Monk is 24. And Terrence Davis is 25. Like I have Davion Mitchell's 24. Like, do you think that there's maybe just a way you look at this team and are like, well, in time, these guys are just going to get better?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess their physical peak you would assume is like around 28 to 32. And they have none of their core guys reaching that age. I mean, frankly, we don't have the luxury of looking that far ahead because Domantas Sabonis is under contract for this season and next, and they need to prove to him in that time span that this team is something promising enough for him to re-sign with. And this has been a fun little 14-game stretch that we've had here, but it's not enough to prove to him why he should stay. So, you know, in theory, sure. I mean, if they could keep De'Aaron Fox, who's already locked up, if they can lock up Domantas Sabonis, they have Keegan Murray under control for a few more years. Davion Mitchell, they still have under control, but we'll see what they end up doing with that. They have all of these guys. I believe Malik has this and next year as well, correct? Herder is locked down for another 3 years. They have enough length of contract on all of these guys to feel that way. It's just you need to get Sabonis locked down. So, you know, assuming that happens, sure. I just haven't quite let myself get that far. And I think a huge piece of this will be kind of to weirdly parallel the Kings, the current Kings and the former Golden State Warriors. It depends what they do with the Harrison Barnes situation because they definitely they can't get, I'm not saying, you know, value wise, like if they lose Harrison, they need to get something in return, but they can't just lose Harrison Barnes and, you know, try and internally fill that role. They need to go out and get somebody who's going to, you know, kind of be a more productive version of Harrison Barnes, especially at such an important position like that small forward position. I'm not a huge believer in Keegan Murray. Actually, I shouldn't say that because I have started to convince myself more and more that Keegan could do that. I think in a more idealized situation would be two guys who are like Keegan Murray's size, who are both, you know, very versatile, very switchable. and that can kind of, play off of each other. But yeah, they need somebody to replace Harrison Barnes. I don't know if that is just a very long-winded way of answering your question.
No, totally. I mean, I think that the HB thing is interesting, right? And I've been kind of surprised by the amount of people talking about trade ideas recently. It feels like way too early in the season for this, but
it's definitely a little early.
Yeah, it's a little early, but I guess it's to be expected when we've been talking about HB and Rashawn trades for like what feels like 2 years now. And Rashawn is obviously the obvious candidate since he's just totally out of this rotation. Which, by the way, I do want to take a sec. I've been really critical of Davion Mitchell and Chimezie Metu.
Yeah,
they're playing really well.
You and I both, brother.
Yes, but they are playing really well. Coach came out post game yesterday and talked about how Davion changed that game for them, and Malik said the same thing. Yeah, end of the third, beginning of the fourth. You mentioned it, like it was sloppy, man. For a second, it was like, God damn, are the Kings possibly going to blow this game to the Spurs right now after that 150-point performance? But Davion Mitchell came out and just pested the ball handlers, man. I think it was like Jeremy Sohan. It's Devin Vassell,
Bro,
I think it is.
I know Davion and Sohan played together at Baylor.
Oh, they did.
Davion knew something, bro. He was in his ass all night long. It was something personal. They for sure used to go at it all the time, or Davion would watch him and be like, this boy is weak. Because Davion, Sohan was what, 6'7", 6'8". Davion is all of 6 foot. And it did not matter. Davion would completely shut him down every time that he was on him. And also, I don't mean to be too corny, but shout out Kings fans who recognized Davion's incredible locking down of Trey Jones I think it was mid, or it might have even been late third quarter, and really were cheering for him as he was just applying ball pressure at the half court line, and really, I think, created momentum out of nothing. And I don't even think he got the steal or got the stop or anything. It was just a really hard-nosed defensive effort from Davion.
He did draw 3 offensive fouls. I think they were there might have been 1 charge and 2 moving screens or something like that, but it's some combination of that. He drew 3 of them. If he can, he's been playing more with Fox recently, because beginning of the year, it was like, Davion, you're getting the 15 minutes that De'Aaron does not play. And then we'll throw you out there sometimes for like a KZ Okpala type treatment, where we're going to throw you out there for a defensive possession before this quarter ends, which is, by the way, wild. I think Kenny talked about this on D'Lo and KC. Like, I think that's who it was. It might have been you. I'm second guessing myself.
It was not me.
It's this is a great point. Wild to throw KZ out there for 12 seconds a game. Like,
yeah,
I mean, is it better than not playing? Like, from a player's perspective, it all depends how KZ handles this, right? But like, I mean, I'm not complaining. It makes sense, but from a player's perspective, I'd probably be in my feelings a little bit.
Right. This argument or debate honestly stems from baseball. It's like in playoff baseball, they just installed a rule where you can no longer do this. But for a long time, like Bruce Bochy actually made this really popular of just bringing in relief pitchers for one batter. And it's like you literally get to face one batter and then you're pulled and then another guy comes in. And it's like, okay, like for sure, but that just seems like you might be over strategizing, and like how ready is somebody to just face one batter, or like to change this back to basketball. Like if you're going to bring him for 12 seconds after not playing the entire first quarter or first half, even, how ready is he to just kind of hop? Right. Is he really the best option to just cold throw out there for 12 seconds and get ISO? I mean, KZ's not getting ISO'd, but in theory, if he were to just come out cold and then get cooked, you kind of look dumb.
Right. But it's been working. I think it makes sense for sure. I just think from a player's perspective, it all depends how KZ is when it comes to that. But like I said, I think I might be guilty of, in that scenario, being in my feelings a little bit, but it's clearly working.
This is personal.
Yeah, for sure. To bring it back to Davion, Davion's been playing great. He's been playing more alongside Fox. And it's funny, I think I tweeted yesterday, like Davion is obviously does what he does on defense, but sometimes he just totally disrupts the flow of their offense and dribbles too much. Yeah. And that was one thing that coach said that he felt like they didn't do great on offense last night against the Spurs, was maybe just dribbling it too much. And I think that Davion is like the prime culprit of that in my mind. But if his shot can continue to go down, which I think he's hit at a decent rate so far this year, 33%. He's not a great three-point shooter, but if that can continue to improve and he can get a better feel for how this offense ideally functions, and I think the second unit just primarily run it through Malik, then I think that we could see more minutes that Davion plays alongside Fox as this year goes on. And then the other guy, and by the way, like I love Davion's defense. There's nothing like watching a guy just totally lock someone up. And I love, like you said, the crowd getting into it. Like that's one of the things that hypes up the crowd the most, it feels like, and that's amazing. And one of the other things that does it is catching lobs. And that's what Messi's doing nonstop this year. Like, I think you mentioned Malik, you get one crazy finish. Messi's playing 15 minutes a night, only the minutes that Sabonis does not play. And they switch everything on defense, and we can put Messi out there because we could switch everything on defense. He's still not good on defense. Like, just to be blunt, he's not good on defense, but you're just surviving those 15 minutes. He is really good on offense as backup 5. And that's because he's not taking, there were games last year. I remember at the end of a first quarter, we'd look at the box score and I'd be like, dude, Chimezie Metu has more shot attempts than I think like everybody else on his team combined right now. Like, I'm like, why does Chimezie Metu have 7 shot attempts at the end of the first quarter? What are we doing? And Mike Brown seems to have figured out the ideal role for Messi. Messi was playing like the 3, the 4 last year. He's in there at the backup 5 and helping move the ball on offense. And he's a vertical threat. He's the only vertical threat on the team, with Rashawn Holmes kind of being MIA. And I think my favorite stat I found, he's attempted 12 threes through the 10 games he's played this year. And he has 14 dunks. Like, that is a recipe for success for Messi. And as much as I've been critical of him, he had a very, very weird presser at the beginning of this year during their I don't even know how much this was really talked about that much, but he had a very, very weird presser where he seemed unhappy with his role and felt like when he's playing that he's playing well, and felt like he deserved more minutes.
I believe that was preseason.
I think it was during
because I believe that we had a conversation of, does this mean that he could be cut?
Maybe. I think that it was during those first 4 games. Okay. But it looked a little worrisome, to be honest. But Messi has settled into his role, which is credit to Messi and credit to Mike Brown. And I just want to make sure to shout out those 2 guys, because I've been super critical of them. Definitely the most critical of those 2 guys more than anybody else. But they're playing really well and important roles on this team, backing up the 2 stars. Have you also? I think you share a lot of the same skepticism.
You and I share
Davion and Messi,
an exact same mind on that.
Yeah, but they're playing well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and they're just starring in their roles. And I don't mean to throw a jab when we're complimenting them, but I do think it has something to do with the limited role that they're in. I think, they're really just starring in their minutes, and, this is the kind of thing that you do to prove that you need more minutes. And I wouldn't, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing more of what we've seen from them these past couple games, because just the nightly highlight from Chimezie has been really, really fun to see. And they have loved, ever since they've had Chimezie, have loved to run that play where he just kind of leaks out around the end or around the baseline, and De'Aaron throws him the lob. And it seems like every single time it works, and every time it's just an absolutely crazy highlight. But somehow Messi didn't even have the highlight of the night the other day with his lob against San Antonio, because everybody knows, the bounce wizard himself, Trey Lyles, off a pump, which I was like, pump fake. Which worked. They fell from the pump fake. Worked. You know why? Because he's been letting it fly. He's been letting that MFer fly, and now the scouting report says fly out on him. So now the pump fake works, and you see that you can't jump when Trey is driving the lane. He threw it. Who was even on? bro, the goddamn Spurs had so many people.
Dude, I'm not gonna.
Was like,
there was at
Bassey,
least one guy. Yeah, Charles
Porgy
Bassey.
Jang. Oh
that
my
was that was a throwback.
bro.
That was a throwback.
That I was like, this guy looks like he's 45. He looks so old.
Yeah, I think he threw it down on Bassey. Actually, I have the clip in front of me real quick. I can check for 2 seconds.
I was so shook.
It is on Bassey, I think it is. And then he gave him a stare after. Like Bassey's right here, and he just looks at him. It was such a great clip. And Sean asked him about it post game, Sean Cunningham, and the quote was, "I was just trying to be aggressive and go to the basket. Somebody just got in the way." Ooh, and that is so badass, bro. I was like, okay, Trey. That was so badass, bro. I am all about the Trey Lyles poster. That was sick. Yeah. A great moment. And he's another example with Davion and Mezzi of coach enabling and optimizing his players. Like we talked about it in the last episode, played the clip of Mike Brown talking about the pump fake thing that we just kind of were talking about there. So it's been great in that aspect. Is there anybody or anything else that you want to point out with this team?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about TD's 31-point performance. And, just how, it was just a case of him being absolutely scorched earth that night. And we've seen TD have a couple nights like that since he's came here to Sacramento. But, that to me just speaks to the level of depth that this team has, especially at the guard position. It really does seem like on a nightly basis, if Kevin Huerter doesn't have it, you can just throw TD in there. If TD doesn't have it, it's good. Just play Malik and Huerter all night. Like, just the amount of guard depth on this team, especially specifically with those three guys, is definitely something that sticks out to me. And, even shout out Delly, who I think hasn't been phenomenal at all, but when he has played so far this season, has shown kind of that backup quarterback steadying hand of like, I'm just going to ride the ship here and we're not going to lose these minutes. General guard depth to me has been something that has stuck out.
Totally. And TD's another guy that TD came out after that 30 whatever point performance against Brooklyn, just casually outscoring Kevin Durant on less shots. And said that, like, I think it was actually Mike that we got to talk to first, Coach Brown, who said that, like, I'm probably as hard on TD as anybody else. Of course, he mentions De'Aaron and the Stars in that as well, but like, TD is very receptive to it. That TD is telling him, like, all right, I got you, like, stay on me, coach. And we absolutely see that. Like, I think it was the first possession of that second quarter against Brooklyn that TD totally blew a switch, and coach called the timeout. Coach did one of his 15 seconds into a quarter. We played one possession. That is not how we play. We got to cut that shit out. I'm going to call a timeout and nip that in the butt. And then TD came out and was balling, and he got the start against San Antonio. And he actually played really well in those first like 5 minutes. I think he had like 5 points, 2 assists, a couple rebounds, and a steal. And I was like, okay, TD's in a rhythm. And then he kind of did honestly a little bit of typical TD, and like, you expect him to be erratic. It's just how erratic is he going to be on offense? And it got a little out of hand, and they started favoring Malik. And coach said post game that he considered starting Malik, but he didn't want to throw off a good thing that's going with Malik coming off the bench, which makes sense. And coach has said over and over, like, it's about who closes games, not starts. And the closing five right now is Fox, Monk, Huerter, Barnes, and Sabonis, right? Like, is that the best five to you?
Yeah, until they figure out, or I shouldn't say figure out, but until Keegan Murray, earns his spot in that rotation, I think that's absolutely the best five for them to go out with. And yeah, I mean, I think Keegan's the only one who maybe one day could crack that. I can't see a reason why they would need to like ever add Davion to that closing lineup. And I think he would be the only
situationally,
one
right? Yeah.
But even then, like, if you're going against Portland, like, is that something you would do? Someone, if you're going against Simons and Lillard,
right?
Maybe
I
Paul
think
and Booker,
you consider it, but Yeah, I mean, in the end, like the team's winning games on offense, right? And you don't want to
Right.
sacrifice your offense too much. And honestly, Davion still has a lot of work to do there. But
Right.
he's
Especially off
legitimately one of the
ball.
best isolation defenders for his size in the NBA. So credit due there. But yeah, you probably are not closing with him. But I think that we'll see it here and there. And if he performs well and can kind of start to click on offense, that he could start to see more opportunity here as the year goes on. What's your favorite meme with the team right now? Beam team, Band-Aid. What we got the coach Mike scream at media
Yeah,
day.
I really like Turn the Fucking Jets On. That shit is really, really funny to me.
Turn the Jets on. Oh, yes.
Come on.
Yes,
Come
yes.
on,
With
come
Coach
on,
running.
come
Yes.
Yes. To me,
It is hilarious.
to me, that's the most undefeated one. Like that's just that one hits every time. The Mike Brown scream is funny, but it might have gotten memed a little too much. The Beam team is fun for sure. There's not a lot of negative in that, but we're winning a lot of games right now. So once we start losing games, it might not kind of roll the same way that it is right now. The Band-Aid thing is fun for now, but I think we've just we've been through enough with the Band-Aid. I think it's also going to be short-lived. We'll probably forget about it in about a month or so.
The
I'm going to go with
Band-Aid's
Turn the
gotta
Fucking Jets
stay.
On.
The Band-Aid's gotta stay till he loses, right?
Yes,
I think keep it, or maybe you just do it for the last home game and you don't take it with on the road trip. Like
Right.
that would make sense to me.
Right.
But I like the Band-Aid thing. I think it's funny, and it was like organic, And I love the whole aspect of De'Aaron saying like he's capping so hard he does
that
not
is
have a
the
fucking
best part
cut
of
on
it.
his face.
Yeah.
And then the fact that it's De'Aaron's wife or say that's passing out Band-Aids to the whole freaking stadium.
Yeah.
It is hilarious. And I love that dynamic. Malik admitted yesterday in postgame that he no longer has a cut on his face, which is funny. But he said the fans won't let him take it off, which feels pretty accurate at this point, to be honest, when they're passing it out as people walk in the door.
Right.
The one other thing I want to touch on before we kind of just mess around for a sec is De'Aaron signing with Klutch. When that gets announced, what's your initial reaction to that?
He wants more. I mean, he just wants more out of his out of basketball career. I think that this is a pretty common thing that happens with guys in the league, especially ones kind of in that, trying to bust through to the top layer of, the Ja Morant, the LaMelo Ball level of popularity and, that kind of stuff. I just think, De'Aaron kind of he signed with Nike straight out of college. He got his kind of signature shoe, which I think was like a limited release kind of thing. But besides that, you don't really see too many the court, adventures for De'Aaron, and the NFT thing kind of went how it went. I just kind of feel like he feels like he wants to be managed by a top tier management. And Klutch Sports obviously has a ton of connections with LeBron James and that whole network of people and the amount of players that they represent and the high level of player that they represent. I think De'Aaron just kind of wants to be in those kind of conversations in those circles. And something tells me that Tyrese Halliburton's or the fact that De'Aaron was able. Sorry, again, this is the second time I've been on. Second time I brought up that name unprovoked. But I think De'Aaron seeing the kind of things that Tyrese has done outside of his career and the amount of popularity that Tyrese has, while De'Aaron probably feels like he is a better player than Tyrese Halliburton, I think might have a little something to do with it. But that could just be me reading too much into it.
Yeah, I don't know about the Tyrese comparison specifically, but I think the point of it,
right. I guess that's probably more of it.
Yeah, like, I mean, where do you ever see De'Aaron getting like big opportunities when it comes to sponsorships or
marketing?
Like anything like that, like his previous agent was one of his childhood friends and wasn't really representing very many other people, and De'Aaron still doesn't have a shoe deal right now. Like that Nike deal you mentioned was a 5-year deal. And he's been wearing Converse all year right now, but he doesn't have a new shoe deal. Like, how does this guy, who's one of the best players and one of the better players in the league, I'll slow down on that one a little bit. One of the better players in the league. He's on a max contract, and he deserved that contract. How does he not get more publicity? You know, and De'Aaron seems like a guy who maybe isn't out seeking publicity or anything like that, but that's what the agency should be doing. And I only bring it up because, like, obviously people are freaking out because Klutch is so attached to LeBron and stars, and it's like, oh, well, these guys are going to go to LA. Trey Lyles is on Klutch, by the way, and that was signed at the time of the big name, and that was signed at the time of the draft when Lyles was a lottery pick. We'll see if that ends up changing down the line or anything, and I don't know that. That's just me guessing. But I mean, I think that you look at the guys that are on Klutch, and more often than not, they get big opportunities. And I think that there's no reason to worry about like De'Aaron wanting to leave because of this.
If anything, it could be beneficial the opposite way. Who, you know, if the Kings keep this kind of momentum that they have right now, exactly. Guess who else is represented by Klutch? I mean, Ben Simmons. You don't want Ben Simmons how he's playing right now, but you know, who else? That was a terrible first example to throw out. LeBron James. How about that? LeBron James. The Kings could get LeBron James due to his connection with Klutch Sports. Just that kind of stuff. That is a legitimate thing that happens in the NBA. Is agents get their players on the same team. There's teams that are CAA teams. There's teams that have the Lakers, for when they first got LeBron, signed Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to a huge contract. He was a Klutch client. That's not a coincidence. Anthony Davis is a Klutch client. LeBron is obviously a Klutch client. Like, these kind of things happen, and like you said, it's just going to be more and more beneficial for the Kings.
Absolutely. It's good for the Kings, for De'Aaron to get more publicity. It was going to happen naturally as the team got better if they continue this streak. But I think this will just amplify it even more, and it's good for the Kings in general. And I've been specifically told a couple times, like, De'Aaron Fox wants to be a lifer in Sacramento. And obviously this is my own addition to this, like, that obviously players are going to want to win games. If the team was absolute shit, I think that any human being would be like, okay, I need to do what's best for myself. But I think that if they can put together a good team around him, which seems to be happening, that De'Aaron Fox wants to be a lifer in Sacramento. And I don't think that him changing agency should freak people out or anything like that. It's actually a good thing for the Kings. Any final thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I do think I shouldn't say it's interesting because that makes it seem like there's something nefarious, but like, did you read anything into his mini media tour that I guess he's kind of done? De'Aaron's not usually somebody who does a ton of outside media. He has been on ESPN before, in that same, I think he was on the Rachel Nichols basketball program before that. But do you find it any coincidence that he signs with Klutch, then does, I don't know the order of things, but then does the Draymond podcast, and then as he was in LA is on NBA TV?
Right. I don't know the timeline. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that happened before or afterwards. But I mean, definitely when I saw the Klutch thing, I'm like, well, shit, he was just on Draymond's pod, you know, like, so it is interesting, but I think that like that type of stuff is good, you know, like when De'Aaron did those appearances, like, it brings good PR to the Kings, especially when they're playing well, you know? So like, I think that is a good thing for the Kings. And I get why it freaks people out initially for like the things that you kind of laid out. Like, you look at like KCP going to the Lakers, or like Lonnie Walker, I think just signed a Klutch, or maybe already was a Klutch guy and he's on the Lakers now.
Right.
So I get why people are worried. Right. But I'm just like, there's no reason to be. De'Aaron's not going anywhere. The team is performing well right now. That is the last thing that anyone needs to worry about. The last thing I want to do, Chris, is I used to do a segment on here that I kind of let naturally die on accident, but I'm going to bring it back, called Overtime. It's always my last segment that's not basketball related, just messing around. So my question to you right now.
Yep.
What video games you've been playing right now, my guy?
Oh,
Because
man.
I have been playing the new COD. I don't know
Yeah.
if you play COD at all. And I never played Warzone, but the
Mhm,
Warzone 2 just dropped, I guess. And it's got this
mhm.
proximity chat, if you know what I'm talking about. That is the
I've seen a
funniest
lot of
shit.
videos. Yeah.
The funniest shit. I got to get a new headset or whatever so I can
Yeah.
actually participate in this. But it's like a throwback to these old COD lobbies that I like grew up on. The most
Oh
toxic
god, the
shit you'll
most
ever be
toxic
a
shit.
part of,
Yeah, bro.
but fucking hilarious. So I think I'm about to get into Warzone 2. I think I played like 2 games my whole life or
Right.
whatever, first Warzone, but I think I'm about to get into that.
Yeah, I have been told my roommate is a big shooter, first person shooter kind of guy. And I was also a huge Modern Warfare 2 player back in the day. That was really the last COD that I put hardcore hours into. Um, I have not played the new Call of Duty. I need to get my hands on it. I need to really just bite the bullet and spend that, what is it, $70 nowadays for games? God, I feel like an old man. I remember when you used to buy a new 2K for $20. Yeah. So yeah, I have not gotten my hands on that. Absolutely need to do that. I have not heard that they are dropping Warzone, but I have seen the proximity chat videos, and that shit is hilarious.
Yes.
I've been playing a lot of 2K. I
Okay.
really am, and I know you've been trying to get me to play Forza too. I literally cannot play that game for more than like I can barely get out of the intro screen.
I
Like, I don't know
definitely
what it
just
is.
re-downloaded 2K and it replaced Forza on my console.
Yeah.
So I will admit I saw that they dropped a Diamond De'Aaron card in my team. I was like,
Did
oh,
they really? I
shit,
have not
yes.
seen that.
I was like, oh
See,
shit, I already know they have a
yeah.
Keegan one. I'm like, oh,
Right.
this might be
Yep.
the
I got the
move.
Keegan one. I was playing some My Team. I was grinding through that. And then I kind of realized, like, oh, you can do domination as much as you want and get like the real NBA players, but then you play one game online against Wilt Chamberlain
Sweaty
in
ass. Yeah, yeah.
1999, Rashard Lewis. And I'm
Right,
like,
right,
what the
right.
fuck is going on right now? Why is like, yeah. So I am now done playing My Team. I've moved on to like my GM mode with the Kings, of course. And
What so when you hop
it's
into
going all right.
a my GM, are you like messing with the roster like right away? Or are you hopping in and
Yo,
like
so I had no fucking idea that some people, some lunatics, Matt George, actually play like every single game, like as they happen. Like it's like,
oh,
pretty much like a real life sim. Like it's like, oh shit, it's Thursday. Like let me knock this King Spurs game out real
I'm gonna
quick.
drop 150 on KD real quick.
Right. Like it's like some people really do like day-to-day type shit on their my GM. Some people also pay like a fuck ton of attention per each season. I'm a big simmer. I like I'll sim like half the season, see where we're at. Oh shit, HB sucking. Let me put TD in starting lineup. Oh shit, we went on a 5-game losing streak. Let me switch that back. Just like micromanaging throughout the season, and then I'll sim through like 3 years, get tired of it, start a new one.
There you go.
So like I'm very, like I probably play video games like 2 maybe 3 times a week for a couple hour spans. So like, I just try and get as much enjoyment as I can. That's why I don't like to play like Call of Duty. My roommate tried to get me to play Halo. It's just too much death, man. Like I barely get a lot of I don't know if it's too much death, man. But like, it's just like I can only play for a certain amount of hours. I'm trying to actually have a good time.
That's fair enough. I'm very like I play in spurts. I'll go through like 2 weeks where I'm playing a
Right.
lot of video games. Then I'll
Right.
go through 2 weeks where I just like don't even touch it, and it doesn't even
Right.
like cross my mind. I think I'm telling you, I just like the tip of the iceberg of like Warzone is really interesting, and I can
Right.
tell that I'm about to fall into it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's about to be one of those stretches for sure.
Right.
Last thing, I guess real quick, when you do a my career, what position are you? Are you I feel like you're a guy. Tell me if I'm wrong with this because you've
Go
told me
ahead.
before, but I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Go ahead.
But I feel like you're a guy that's like the Kings need a forward. So I'm gonna just fill that void. You are guilty as fuck, huh?
I just usually make multiple ones, and at least one of them will be to fill a position for sure. But I do always typically have like when I'm gonna pick my team, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna go to the Warriors because they have a 1, a 2, a 3. Like they need a 4. Like they need a really 5, so I should go fill in there. I don't know. Like, yeah, fuck you.
Do you pick the Kings?
No,
do you pick
I only
Kings,
have one right now, and he's a power forward.
Okay. Do you pick the Kings as your team, though?
Traditionally, no. No, I probably should, though, because they've sucked traditionally, and so it would have been a good idea to probably just, like, up that team. But instead, I'm always, like, picking teams that, like, are good. Because it's just funner. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Just trying to wax people.
Oh, fair
Plus,
enough,
like 2K's the career mode sucks now, so there's no fucking point in like actually playing the games.
It's really bad. It's pretty tough.
There used to be a point where like you would actually play the career because it was fun to like go through the career, but now it's just
now you got to rap and figure out who you want.
Bro, don't get me started on the rap. You actually have to rap now. How much of the new 2K career have you played?
Not much at all. I actually never really play that much career mode, but I've seen the memes.
You have to go to the studio with J. Cole and like they give you 4 different options and you have to like rhyme the first bar with the second. Like it's fucking ridiculous. 2K. I remember when that shit used to be about basketball.
And you said you're a power forward?
I'm a power forward.
So you're Marvin Bagley?
No. No, definitely not. I'm I don't know. I'm like Poku, honestly.
Is that a good or bad thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like the idealized version. I'm Bull. I mean, that's isn't that what every center is when you play 2K?
Yes.
So yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I'm definitely Bull is probably honestly the most accurate. Depiction of my player.
Giannis was always the wildest thing to me because I always look at him and I'm like, dude, this is the guy that if I was up against in 2K, I'd fucking turn my console off and be pissed off at how unrealistic this is. But Giannis is just a real human being that does that shit.
Right. Shit does not make sense.
No, at all. At all. Absolute cheat code. Last thing before we get out of here, I should have mentioned this at the top.
Oh, God.
My new co-host.
Chris Watkins.
Here for the long haul. That is the plan, to keep Chris on board. Glad to have you doing this with me, man. We got a really good relationship. I think I get along with you as well as anybody else in Kings Media, which helps a lot for different pods, obviously, and scheduling and everything. But you've been doing a lot, bro. You with your Kings Weekly, Return of the Roar, pre and post game. I feel like I'm missing something else.
I hop on post game like a recap show that we do on YouTube every so often.
There you go. But yeah, good to have you here, man. Anybody
excited
unaware with Chris Watkins, which is not going to be many people, but at Chris M. Watkins on Twitter, again, Sactown Sports 1140, new co-host of the Kings Sports podcast. So hype for that. Hopefully these dubs keep coming in, man. Are you superstitious at all?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
All right. Just wondering.
Are you?
I'm not. I'm a little stitious. You know what I mean?
You're not superstitious, but you're kind of.
Yeah. I'm like if I were in Malik's shoes, for example, I don't think I would take the Band-Aid off until I lost. Like, I'm not going out of my way to do things, but if I've done something over and over and then I'm winning, then I'm not going to change it. And I'll intentionally make sure I'm not changing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I would say kind of stitious sounds right then.
Yeah.
And I think everybody is that to a certain level, you know? You definitely don't want to you just don't want to leave it open as an excuse. But though I guess some people are almost the opposite, to where it's like, oh no, I'm not going to let anything control me. And I'll play with fucking no Band-Aid. I don't know, 5 Band-Aids on just to prove that it doesn't matter.
Right.
I would say that I'm probably the same as that, where it's like, I mean, if something's working, if I tap a glass 3 times, that sounds more OCD than anything, but I don't know. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Definitely get you. Well, if anybody listening has been doing something for the last 5 games in a row,
right,
do not stop. I swear to God. Change it up. Maybe in a couple games if they do lose. But keep it up if you've been doing anything specific. It's a big if. Detroit.
Some are saying they might not ever lose again.
Some people are. There are some.
It's out there.
But that's going to do it for this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast for myself and Chris Watkins of Sactown Sports 1140. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review, and definitely take a look at the Kings Herald and all the great work there from myself and all the other amazing guys and gals that are a part of that, and take a look at their Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoyed this episode, again, subscribe, rate, and review is much appreciated, and you'll hear from us again in the next couple of days.